Although typically grown as a cash grain, winter wheat can provide most of the cover crop benefits of other cereal crops, as well as a grazing option prior to spring tiller elongation. Wheat also is slower to mature than some cereals, so there is no rush to kill it early in spring and risk compacting soil in wet conditions. Biodegradable polymers have been used as carriers in drug delivery systems for more than 4 decades. Early work used crude natural materials for particle fabrication, whereas more recent work has utilized synthetic polymers. The commercial success of these polymers has led to further research in the field aimed at bringing forward new formulation types for improved delivery of various small molecule and biologic drugs. To thrive, cities must lean on nature. That means having open green spaces and interconnected waterways to prevent floods, green roofs and walls that reduce temperatures and produce food, and forests planted as green belts to oxygenate urban areas and regenerate ecosystems. The outsized influence of rich countries on paleontology could lead to a warped view of life's history, the researchers say. Researchers studying large-scale trends in paleontology using resources are keenly aware that the fossil record is biased in myriad ways, including the age and type of rock in which fossils survive. But little consideration is given to the biases of the collectors themselves. A solar fuels generation research program is focused on hydrogen production by means of reactive metal water splitting in a cyclic iron-based redox process. Iron-based oxides are explored as an intermediary reactive material to dissociate water molecules at significantly reduced thermal energies. A crew of scientists voyaged by ship from the southern tip of Chile into the frigid Antarctic to search for clues to one of the great unknowns of climate change. They planned to crisscross a remote patch of sea near the spot where, a year earlier, another crew had injected a tank full of an inert chemical 1 mile below the surface. The mathematical language for talking about connections, which usually depends on networks, vertices and edges, has been an invaluable way to model real-world phenomena. But a few decades ago, the emergence of giant datasets forced researchers to expand their toolboxes and, at the same time, gave them sprawling sandboxes to apply new mathematical insights. According to Einstein's general theory of relativity, the gravity of a black hole is so intense that nothing can escape it. The more sophisticated understanding of black holes developed by Stephen Hawking and his colleagues did not question this principle. Hawking and others sought to describe matter in and around black holes using quantum theory, but they continued to describe gravity using Einstein's classical theory. No planet will have a complex form of life that popped into existence all on its own. Whatever life is like on an alien planet, it must have begun simply. But if life is to achieve any kind of complexity, the only way that complexity can accumulate is if favorable changes and innovations are retained and unfavorable ones are lost. The idea of self-disseminating vaccines has floated through epidemiological circles for decades, conceived mainly as a tool for protecting the health of wildlife. But evolutionary biologists have refreshed the proposal with evidence from their own modeling and other experimental work, which suggests that self-disseminating vaccines could be a safe and practical way to head off zoonotic pandemics as well. The scientists found that division of reproductive labor in ants arose when an ancient insulin signaling pathway, typically involved in maintaining nutrition and growth, became responsive to social cues. In doing so, they also uncovered deeper insights into a process underlying how the environment gets under the skin to affect behavior, physiology, and the health and well-being of other members of a society. Outside the biblical tradition, Babylon intrigued Greek and Roman writers, who added to the rich store of legends that have come down to the present day. Popular tales of Babylon's fantastic structures may also be products of legends and confusion. Yet to historians and archaeologists, Babylon is a real bricks-and-mortar place at the center of the vibrant Mesopotamian culture. Medieval mapmakers supposedly inscribed the phrase "Here be dragons" on maps showing unknown regions of the world. Unfortunately, apart from an inscription on a globe, this claim is unfounded. Although there were no dragons, and the inscription "Here be dragons" was virtually never used, some of the purported earliest mapmakers did have to deal with real and formidable megafauna. A patriarchal family is one run by the father or eldest male of a household. He usually decides the duties of the women and children in the family. In this role, the patriarch solves family disputes and divides the family's wealth. The patriarch is also the spiritual leader of the family because he is thought to be the closest to the spirits of the family's ancestors. The ice house structures, of which 4 still remain intact, are located south of Sultan Kala. These large, conically domed earthen structures would have had sheets of ice built up on the ground level over the course of the winter to provide year-round ice supplies. Prevailing winds are winds that blow from a single direction over a specific area of the Earth. Areas where prevailing winds meet are called convergence zones. Generally, prevailing winds blow east-west rather than north-south. This happens because Earth's rotation generates what is known as the Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect makes wind systems twist counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. A simple barometrical altimeter includes a sealed metal chamber, a spring, and a pointer that shows altitude in meters or feet. The chamber expands as air pressure decreases and contracts as it increases, bending the spring and moving the pointer. An altimeter can be mounted on an aircraft's instrument panel or worn on a person's wrist. People have used biomass energy from living things, since the earliest cavemen first made wood fires for cooking or keeping warm. Biomass is organic, meaning it is made of material that comes from living organisms, such as plants and animals. The most common biomass materials used for energy are plants, wood, and waste. The stratosphere is the next layer up from Earth's surface. Temperatures in the stratosphere increase with altitude. A high concentration of ozone, a molecule composed of 3 atoms of oxygen, makes up the ozone layer of the stratosphere. This ozone absorbs some of the incoming solar radiation, shielding life on Earth from potentially harmful ultraviolet light. A newly created form of carbon in a mesh just 1 atom thick is tantalizing scientists with hints that it could sharply improve rechargeable batteries and allow wires so small that they can operate at a scale where metals fail. The material is highly conductive and may prove able to store more electrical energy than even graphene, the astonishing atomic thickness carbon honeycomb material identified nearly 20 years ago. Studying how mouse brains process chemosignals will help researchers understand general principles of how their brains form social memories, and could help scientists identify what happens when these functions go wrong. Eventually, this may help scientists understand what happens in people whose ability to recognize others is impaired or those who have difficulties with social interactions caused by autism. Desalination is the answer to long-term water security, but it's also expensive and energy-intensive. The good news is that scientists are developing some viable solutions. The first desalination plant in Europe was built in Spain nearly a half-century ago. Since then, facilities have sprung up in water-stressed regions throughout Europe. Hydrogen will play several roles in our future. For transport, we now see several manufacturers launching cars powered by electricity produced in a hydrogen fuel cell, and this will happen even more in the near future. Fuel cell buses are also an attractive solution for public transport. Also, engineers are now even starting to consider using fuel cells and hydrogen to power trains. To withstand the forces of nature and the huge forces the rotation itself generates, blades are manufactured with a multi-layer coat of armor. Typically, the outer layer erodes during operation and the inner layers can become detached. Although the lifespan of a turbine is theoretically 25 years, current medium-sized systems typically require extensive maintenance at about 10 years due to blade deterioration. Online speech has become such an influential way of experiencing politics today, not just participating in democratic processes like elections, but also the way we lead our daily democratic life through digital communication. If these sorts of irreverent and vitriolic exchanges are so prominent online, then we need to see how we can bring nuance to understanding them. The robotic system is composed of a floating platform with 8 cables that are connected to a mobile robot that will move around on the sea floor beneath it to collect waste items in a box, using a gripper, hook, or suction device, depending on the size of the litter. The orientation of the robot can be controlled by adjusting the tension of the cables. The use of technologies for the inclusion and empowerment of persons with disabilities is not new, from the creation of Braille and the first hearing aid to the invention of the wheelchair. For disabled persons, new assistive technology can make all the difference, while technology and innovation are breaking down the barriers to achieving full participation. There are other components, aside from the wheels and rails, that add to the noise a train makes when it passes. Older trains had their air conditioning units underneath the carriage, but modern trains have been lowered to allow people with less mobility to enter the carriage more easily. As a result, air conditioning units are now on top of the carriage, where they add to the train noise. The most widely accepted model for planet formation, known as the nebular hypothesis, begins with a swirling disk of gas and dust, leftover material from the birth of a nearby star. At some point in time, gravity triumphs over the pressure supporting this cosmic dust, which then starts to rotate, quickly collapsing under its own gravity. In order to achieve the free flow of goods and services, with work and capital between the member countries, they needed to establish mutual politics in areas as diverse as agriculture, transport, and when they were concerned with a far wider range of issues. Scholars build their own personal libraries to support not only particular projects, but also general reading in their field. They buy or make photocopies of materials when possible so they can consult them frequently, mark pages, and write annotations on them. When moving into a new field, they add to their collections, usually concentrating on primary texts. Behavioral and social sciences research helps predict, prevent, and manage illness in individuals and in whole populations. This research also helps people change their behaviors, understand treatments, and learn how to stick with them. Society's role is significant, too. Access to healthcare affects decision-making and behavior. Undergraduates may choose to major in any one of 125 academic majors. The university's distinguished faculty includes internationally known scientists, authors, and teachers who are committed to continuing the university's tradition in providing one of the highest quality undergraduate educations available. Don't miss the beginning of the lecture since it is very often the most valuable part, for instance, because it reviews previous lectures or outlines objects and lecture structure. If you easily get distracted by other students, sit near the front. The world's fifth largest continent, Antarctica, is almost entirely covered by ice 2,000 meters thick. The area sustains varied wildlife, including seals, whales, and penguins. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 and enforced since 1961, provides for international governance of Antarctica. It's time for this young loggerhead turtle to go to work. We can tether turtles in these little cloth harnesses, put them into this tank, and dull swimming place. University of North Carolina biologist Ken Lohman studies sea turtles that are programmed from birth for an extraordinary journey. Mother turtles buried the eggs on the beach, and then returned to the sea, and the eggs hatch about 50 to 60 days later. Technological advances are eliminating the need for bank tellers, threatening an entry point for women into the male-dominated industry, which has sought to promote more females to leadership roles. While the climb remains steep, some financial companies have managed to improve the gender balance in their executive ranks. As teller jobs dwindle, there's a risk that banks will raise the educational requirements for those jobs. An inclined plane is a simple machine with no moving parts. It is simply an even sloping surface. It makes it easier for us to move objects to higher or lower surfaces than if we lifted the objects directly upwards. It is believed that ancient Egyptians used inclined planes to carry heavy stones to build pyramids. The root systems of vegetative cover hold soils in place and prevent wind and water erosion. It also ensures its supply of organic matter from dead leaves and the dropping of animal waste. The vegetative cover also shelters the soils from excessive heat from the sun. It helps to reduce evaporation and retains soil moisture needed for the breakdown of organic matter.